What's up, guys? This is Justin again with another video. Today we're going to try something a little different with this last video. So we're going to start with our sisters. As you can see, they're all totally assembled. As for their exact construction, give me just a second, I'll tell you what I built. So obviously here we have our Novitiate, I don't know how to pronounce that, superior. We have 2 militants. We've got, where'd she go? The hospitaller. We've got the reliquarius, something like that. We have 2 of our purgatus. We have a dialogus. We have the condemner. We have the duelist. I'm pretty sure that's everybody. Yes. Now, ever since I watched the last couple of Battle Brothers videos, I have kind of taken a different approach to how I think about my kill teams when I'm putting them together, or when I'm working on them and stuff. And I kind of went ahead, I looked through the stratagems to see what these guys could do, or the tac ops. I looked through abilities, I looked through equipment a little bit, and I kind of came to the very quick realization that these guys are definitely geared for a more defensive play style. They have options for long range weapons, but I grabbed the stuff that made sense to me. You always take an icon bearer, no matter what. And then everybody is pretty much kitted for short range, with the exception of her. She can shoot from conceal just about anywhere on the board. But everybody else is pretty much short range. There is a tac op that you can take that lets you remove the range restriction on pistols. So that kind of gives these guys all a little bit of an edge for one combat point, or command point. So that is kind of interesting. But, I just kind of went with my gut here to figure out what I thought would work the best for these guys, and this is kind of where I landed. They had abilities that I liked. I tried to stray away from my usual, I'm going to build a bunch of specialists and then have a team that's, kind of okay, but not really, great, because I've got a bunch of dudes that can do a bunch of stuff, but nobody's really good at one particular thing. So I picked a specialization for these guys. They're like an objective / defensive oriented close range kill team. Maybe grab the 3 closest objectives to you, and maybe sneak up and grab one, but let the enemy come to you. With that, we're going to go ahead and start talking about how we're going to work on these guys. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background on why I chose what I chose. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to handle this a little bit backwards from how we've done our Tau. And I'm going to go ahead and actually base these guys first. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, it just feels like it'd be really nice to paint everything as I'm going, all at the same time. Not have to worry too much about painting the base separate, then putting the mini on it, making sure they're going to stay. I can fix these minis down, they ain't going nowhere. The other reason is a lot, and I say a lot, it's literally 3 or 4 of these minis have basing elements incorporated into the mini. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that to my advantage. Now some of these, with the Tau it was only 1. and it was a rock, so it was pretty easy to kind of get him down on a base. But typically with these larger, more organic shapes like this is like straight up just some dirt. It's a little bit trickier to kind of mount them on top of something once you've already built it. Now I could very easily just cut this stuff away and, you know, put the minis down that way, but I do like when they kind of give me a little bit to work with here, so I'm going to try and use that to my advantage. I'm going to try to use what little clues they've given me here to incorporate into a base for these guys. So we're going to base them first, we're going to prime everything all together, and then we're going to go ahead and start painting. So let me go ahead and glue these guys down to their bases, and we're going to talk about how we're actually going to base them. Okay, so we've actually gone ahead and put a couple of these minis on bases, but there's a few that I'm not going to put on bases yet, just because of, like, for the Superior, for example, she's got like a very large, like, double layered cloak type deal, and I don't really want to cover that up. I do want to be able to, like, at least make sure that I can get black and stuff underneath here. So we're going to build her base, and then we're going to, we'll probably mount her to the top of it if it gives me enough clearance. And then the same thing for these guys. They have a cloak, or a tabard at least, so we're going to go ahead and build their bases as well. So I've put one piece on the Superior's base already. I went ahead and I had a spare wall with a pillar. I went ahead and chopped out a piece of the window, and I glued that to the base. I thought that would look cool, and I think I'm going to build just like a tiny little hill maybe, and then just kind of plant her on there like that, just kind of off to the side a tiny bit. I think that'll look really cool. So my idea with these guys is I'm going to do something similar to the Tau bases, but I don't think I'm going to go as hard on, like, using terrain bits, because I do want them to be different, but I want them to exist kind of in the same battlefield, if that makes sense. So I think I'm going to use the bricks, because some of these, this one in particular, has bricks on her feet, or she's got her feet on some bricks, and then I think another one, this one, has like a brick sticking out from the ground. So we're going to use the bricks, but I'm not going to use any like actual terrain. I think I'm going to use a little bit of actual flock, and then like some tufts and stuff for these ones. So like maybe the Tau have been into the main city or whatever, and these guys are on the outskirts, where there's not quite as much in the way of ruined buildings and things like that. So that's the idea I think I'm going to run with. The leader, of course, she gets a little special piece because she's the leader. So let's go ahead. Let's grab these bricks. Let's just put a couple bricks down and see where things go. And again, we're going to go ahead and use our super glue. I'm just going to go ahead and throw a few bricks down. In front of me, I'm not really going to go super crazy, but there are 10 models here, so I want to make sure everyone gets at least one brick. So we'll go with that. So for starters, we'll grab the lady that's already got some. We'll just give her one. I'm going to need more super glue soon. So let's throw like one here. And push that down. Let's throw one on top. Kind of at like an angle. Make it a little bit more 3D. Alright, this one. I'm going to just throw a couple down here, nothing too crazy. I am going to try and make them look a little bit like more 3D, like kind of put one at an angle so often, or you know, tip one up on its side, something like that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put bricks down on all these bases, and then I'll come back. Alright, so the next part of this process is going to be pretty much identical to what we did with the towel. We're going to add this large texture, and then we're going to add some finer texture, and then we'll see where we're looking and what we need to add. The only real difference is I'm going to use some thin super glue this time, so this stuff's a lot runnier. It's a little trickier to use. I'm going to show you here. It's almost like water. It just kind of goes down where it goes down, and then I'm going to sprinkle my texture over the top of it rather than dipping it in, because I don't want pieces to flake off and get stuck inside of my texture container, which has happened. So go ahead and grab some of this right here. There we go. Alright, and then I'm gonna do the exact same thing with the light texture. So I'm not gonna show that. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. Come back. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, so here's where we're at. I think the texture's pretty good. I covered some of the bricks a little more than I had intended to, but that's okay. I think it still looks pretty good. So what I want to do next is, first I want to say, maybe for this last step, for adding this texture, instead of using super glue, maybe go ahead and use like some watered down PVA. I think you'll have a much better time using PVA glue. And I'm actually going to go ahead and take this, and I'm going to apply some of this over the top of this just to lock everything down. With this extra thin super glue, I think what it tends to do with this smaller texture is it soaks it up and it makes it bind to each of the other pieces of that texture, which, you know, in theory sounds all fine and great, but once you flip everything over and tip it back into your container, you can see you get all these large kind of thick pieces that stick together and clump together until there's no more moisture to absorb. So I think PVA glue might have been the better option. It also is so thin it got underneath a couple of my pieces that I had cemented down and raised them up and made them pop off of the base, which it only happened with like 1 or 2 pieces, so not a major thing, but something to look out for. So what we've got left to do, I'm going to go ahead and slap some of this PVA. This is literally it's like a 50-50 water and PVA mix in like a ketchup bottle, and I think there's like a drop of isopropyl in here, but I'm just gonna drip this over the top. Oh, look at that, it ran right off. Okay, so I'm glad we got to see that, which means we need this. So this is I can't remember what they call this, but it's a mix of isopropyl and water, and you just put a drop on what you're trying to put your PVA on, and then this will stop it from, I guess, being hydrophobic, and that sinks right in there. So we're just gonna fill that up just to kind of make sure that there's something inside of all this that's going to lock it all in. And I'm going to do this to all of these pieces. So I will be back. Alright, so now that this texture has dried, the glue on top is dried, I'm pretty confident that most of this is sealed in pretty good as I as I peel some of the small bits off the top. We're going to go ahead and put a texture over top of this. So the big difference between this and the other bases I did for the towel is I want most of this to be kind of buried under a different texture. I was really using some of the other elements to create like an elevation distance, I guess. So we're going to grab our handy dandy little popsicle stick here, and we're going to just kind of take our earth texture. We're not going to use concrete this time. We're going to use an earth texture, and we're just going to smudge that over the top of this, And that should kind of start leaning us in the direction we want to go. Now I'm going to try and cover the whole base. If I get a little bit on my bricks, that's okay. And some of these might get a second pass, depending on how well the figures stand on them. But I think once this is done, we're going to go ahead and mount the figures to the bases. So here's the first one. Something like that. Leave a little bit of that on the side, that's okay. But you know, I want to cover majority of this base. Now for the ones that are already kind of done, this might be a little trickier because this is not exactly the best tool for this job. But we're gonna see what we can get by with and get this in there as good as we can, and then I'll figure it out from there. I might have to use, like, if I can find like a toothpick or another tool that can reach in there a little bit better, we'll go ahead and use that. But I'm going to try and get all this on all these bases. I'm going to get everything primed up, and then I'll come back. Alright, so we are back. All of our minis are primed. Let's go ahead and start with the leader. Everything I think looks pretty good. Nice zenithal on there. The bases I think look pretty good. Everything's on there nice and sturdy. Let's grab our dialogus. So, this is the part where we're going to split everybody up. I think I'm going to split between just like a normal warrior and my leader. Now, I think most of what I do is going to apply to I guess our normal guy, because that's majority of what these guys are. But she's going to be pretty similar in a lot of ways, with the exception of like her red cloak and some of the detail work and stuff. But we can worry about that when we get to it. So let's start with our normal troop. So the big difference between these guys and like a standard sister. Let me see if I can find that box. One of these days I'll stop doing this. Well, I guess I can use the big one as an example. They don't have as much armor, so they look at a glance, you know, like they're kitted out the same way, but they're not. These guys have the leg armor, they have the shoulder armor, and that's pretty much it. These guys have full leg armor, not just the lower leg, so knee down. They have hip armor, chest armor, the shoulder pads, of course, and then a big backpack to power everything. Now, this one in particular doesn't have like armor. It seems like she's wearing like a normal robe or whatever underneath all this. But typically you would basically be armored all the way up, like a Space Marine would, and then, you know, a helmet optional. So, majority of this guy is going to be like a darker color, but where she's got all these fancy robes over top, you're going to get that dark color as well, but a lot more red. And then, you know, again, she's got the fancy cloak and stuff, so some more ornate stuff on top of that. So let's go ahead and start here. We'll go ahead and start with this. And the first thing I want to do is I want to paint her armor. I don't know why I struggled so hard with that. So we're going to start with a Corvus Black. It's a really nice, like, navy blue, almost black color. It's really dark without, you know, it reads as black until you put something darker against it. And we're not worried about being super neat here. We're just going to go ahead and grab this, base coat all this stuff out. And and see where that takes us. Okay. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and grab this on the other models. Alright, so now that all of our armor and stuff is base coated, we are going to go ahead and jump in a different direction, almost the opposite direction, really. We're going to go ahead and use, I'm going to use Gorgon hide here. It's like a really, 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 really light blue. It's almost white, and until I put anything on top of it or against it, you guys are going to swear that I'm painting this white. So all we're going to do here is we're going to base coat like the little headdress. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to start with our shadows and we're going to work our way up. So we're really not going to go much darker than this. I might stick a wash over top of this just so that we can create separation between edges and stuff. But besides that, the goal here is to create our darkest shadow color. And when you're doing white, you don't want to go all the way down to black. Unless you're looking to do something very specific. So, there we go. Just bring that in around here. And then it'll be a little easier to show on the Novitiates. That actually sounds more right. But yeah, so just block that all in. And these aren't going to get as much in the way of shading and stuff as you might think anyway. I mean, they're on the top of the heads, this little piece in the back. Some of them it goes across their chest as well. You're not going to need to do a whole lot of shadow or anything like that here. You just want to make sure that this color gets blocked in for the most part and you don't really cover it. But this will give you a really nice base to work off of and to highlight from. So take your time, get in there, and make sure that this little headdress is taken care of. Alright, so I forgot to record part of what I did yesterday. I just came up here for a very brief moment anyway. All I did was paint the like the cowls on the heads. I did that, and then we shaded them with a very, very, very thin down mix of Agrex Earthshade to Lawman Medium. And then now we're going to shade all the other stuff that's going to be white. So we've got a little pool of Lawman Medium right here. We're just going to grab just a teeny little bit of Rust Gray. I think that's what that is, yeah. And we're going to mix that in. And just, we want that real, 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 real thin glaze consistency. And you touch your paper towel, wick some of that off. And for this, I'm just going to kind of paint it over the wings on all the shoulders. And what that's going to do is give me that little bit of that blue-gray in the shadows. Now, you can do this over the hat or the headdresses if you want as well. I didn't really want them to read as blue, but I think the blue looks nice on the wings. And if you don't like how subtle this is, you can wait for it to dry and just drop another coat in, and it will look just fine. Alright, so next up we're going to go ahead and paint our white details. So here on the wet palette we've got some matte white paint from the Army Painter. Any white will do. I'm going to just go ahead and press that down on the palette, kind of incorporate some water into that, get a nice point on my brush. And for this I'm literally just going to start highlighting the tops of the headdresses and then the tops of any folds. I'm not going crazy with these white highlights. Now the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and stay a little bit away from the edge where any of that wash set. There shouldn't have been a ton of wash to begin with, but I want to make sure that there's a little line of separation. Now a lot of these have smooth backs on them, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of skip maybe like a millimeter of that area and then just bring the white paint the rest of the way down. And then for the backs, we're just going to pop that highlight in there. Same deal with the front, we're just going to kind of skip a little bit, hit that edge, just like that. Nothing too crazy. And then one more time for demo. This one's going to be a little hard to show off, so let's grab the sky. So, get your paint. We're going to do just the top. And again, try to avoid that ring if you can help it. If you hit it, it is what it is. And then I'm just going to grab like this heavy fold here. I'm going to go over the top of it. I'm going to hit this fold over here and then the bottom. Just like that. And then on this side we're going to grab some of that. Easy enough. Alright, so the next step is we're going to take a little bit of Corvus Black. We're going to mix that into some Lamon medium or glaze medium, whatever medium you want. Just a little bit. And then we're going to take a bunch of Incubi Darkness and we're going to mix that in there. And we're going to get like this kind of really dark, cool blue-green color. And this is going to be our first part of highlighting the armor. So there's two methods to this. I'm going to use a little bit of both. So we're going to grab this one just because it's easy to see. And once this focuses, we're going to use the light as a guide for how we're going to highlight this. So we're going to grab a little bit of that mix. We're going to wick off the excess, and we're just going to grab this little corner right here and just kind of glaze that in to where that highlight shows up, based on the reflections that you see with your eye. So I'm going to come over this way. I'm going to grab this, pretty much this whole lip here, and we're going to do like a fat edge highlight. And then on this side I'm just going to grab this little bit right here, this edge over here. I'm going to grab like a little bubble over this way, because that's just kind of what the light's doing. So we're going to let that dry, and we're going to basically work across the armor. So we're going to pull our pigments up this way. On the knees I'm going to grab a little bit on this side, and then just kind of like a dot here, as well as that upper lip. And I'm going to grab like a big section in the middle of the leg here. Now on this one it's a little off to the side, but we're going to still make sure we grab that. Now it might show up different for what you guys see compared to what I see, just because of the way lighting and perspective and all that stuff works. But trust your eyes. Look at it, see where the highlights are sitting based on the way you're holding the mini, and then just start filling in those gaps. So once those dry, you might want to come in and grab another one. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a tiny bit of that paint. You might want a smaller brush, you might not, it's up to you. and we're just going to edge highlight most of these panels. Now you don't have to go super crazy here, but pick out some edges, pick out the tops and bottoms of things. Wherever it's the sharpest is usually a good idea, and we're going to put like a kind of big edge highlight in here. Again, you don't have to go wild, just make sure that you pick out the edges you want to be able to see, kind of no matter what. There's one right here, pop that right in there. And this is the first step of this, so if you mess something up here, it won't be the most noticeable thing in the world. So this is a good place to practice. It's dark on dark. Now again, you will want to make sure that you come back and sort of refine that a little bit. Come on, focus. Wish you were just a little bit faster. But there you go. So you can kind of see it. So I'm going to do this like 2 or 3 times. I'm going to refine these highlights a little bit, and then we're going to come back. Alright, so now that that glaze has finished, it's dried, we're going to take just some pure Incubi Darkness, and then I'm just going to mix in just a teeny bit of Flow Improver. You can use glaze medium, whatever you want. You just want a little bit. You want kind of like a thicker glaze, but you don't want it to be as thick as like a regular opaque layer of paint. And then we're just going to come in and we're going to just reinforce those highlights we just did with that Incubi Darkness, because the last one was kind of meant to sort of establish the first little bit of that gradation, get that started, and now this time we want to come in a little bit more control, be a little bit more selective about where we're putting it. But you want to hit all the same areas, just less, if that makes any sense. So let me zoom in and see if I can show off any of what I've done. It's going to be a little difficult to see, just because of the colors that are used. So we just popped some highlights there on the foot, on the shoulder pads. So like here on this shoulder pad, we're just going to come in and just grab that area right there, and then give it just a little edge highlight, just to kind of reestablish the fact that it is metal. And then again, you want to work this around all of the pieces that you've done so far. And just take your time. So we'll come back when that's all done. Alright, so I'm going to take some Thunderhawk Blue. We're going to put this up here on the palette. We're going to grab some of that thinned down Incubi Darkness mix, and we're going to put those together. And this is going to be kind of our last kind of glazed in highlight, if you will. So we're going to use that same thin down mix, and we're going to do the exact same thing, except this time I'm going to start with my edge highlights. Just kind of knock those in here real quick. I'm trying to keep them kind of thin. I'm not really the most worried about it, but and then I'm going to glaze this down here into just that corner right there. On this side, I want to glaze it up towards the top. But the same deal is, you're just going to do like last time. You're just going to try and trace that into a smaller and smaller and smaller area until you decide you're ready to stop. Now, I'm not going to go much higher than this. In fact, I think I might do a very thin layer of the Thunderhawk Blue, just to kind of highlight my corners and stuff. But I would like to keep everything going forward as like a mix if it's going to be part of regular highlights and stuff. So we're just going to trace our way around these parts. We're going to make sure everything looks the way we want it to. Now I can already tell that, like right here on the shoulder, let me zoom in for you. Right here on that shoulder, that's drying a little bit harsher than I want it to. So I'm going to glaze some more of that in. Clean my brush off. And keep this in focus, I want to kind of feather that edge just a little bit. And if that doesn't really work the way you want it to, you can just thin down your paint a little bit more and just kind of glaze a couple layers over to build that transition a little bit better. So that seems to have done the trick so far. So we're going to let it dry and see how it goes. So keep on working those colors in. This should dry relatively dark. Now obviously you're highlighting, you're using brighter colors. So it's not going to be black anymore, but it should still look black. That's kind of the goal here. So I'm pretty happy with that. So we're going to keep pushing that just a little bit more, and then we'll come back. Alright, so the last kind of major step for painting your armor is to take that Thunderhawk blue, get it thinned down a little bit, get it on your brush with a nice tip, and we're just going to go through and edge highlight with pure Thunderhawk blue on all the sharp edges. Don't worry too much about edge highlighting every single thing. Just grab the sharpest edges, the ones that matter the most. So the shoulders are, in my opinion, the biggest deal. Now the knees and the knee armor is important, but I'm not going to make a big fuss about it. I'm not going to stress over it because it's so tiny and it's all tucked away in like weird spots. I'm going to focus on the shoulders. I'm going to grab that edge highlight. And then for the knees, I'm just going to grab this little top plate here over the knee. And that should be good enough. Now, if you want to take it just a little teeny tiny bit further, you can find your highlights and just put a dot in where you think the highlight to that area would be. So the highlight to your highlight. Just the highest point, just put a dot in. It's not a big deal. It will look fine. You know, don't stress over making the finest, tiniest lines in every single area. Just do what, you know, it doesn't have to look perfect. Just make sure it looks good enough for you. So one more time, just on our leader here, she has a lot less armor to cover. So I'm just going to grab that knee plate again. Put my dot. I'm going to grab some of these rivets because I'm not painting the armor or the rivets of different colors. So if you see a rivet, just poke it. And then here on her chest plate, we're just going to grab a little dot over here, a little dot over on this side, and that's pretty much it. Now if you want to, you can go a little higher on the thigh. If you want to grab this edge highlight, you can. This is, I don't want to say it's tricky, but it's trickier than maybe some of the other ones. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to just real gently try and trace that line as best I can. If I don't get it, I don't get it. It is what it is. It's actually a little thick. It's hard to do on camera, but we'll go back and tidy that up and hopefully fix that later. But carry on through these, and that should pretty much be your armor. I am going to do one more spot highlight on these, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with that right now, just so we can skip a whole step. On the sharpest of sharp corners, we're just going to grab that white paint. We're just going to put it right here in the absolute most corner of everything, and then in the center of those last highlights we did, just a drop of white. It doesn't have to be big. Just make sure you grab the absolute most extreme highlights. And if you thin this down just a teeny bit, it'll kind of blend in with that blue-green, and you know, it'll just look like the next color in that progression. Because this is slightly thinned down between having water on my brush and being on the wet palette, you know. There you go. So just grab some of those corners, grab some of the high points. Don't do any actual edge highlighting with this. Like I said, just grab some fine details. A little highlight here and there. and something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish all these guys up, and then we'll come back and talk about what's next. Alrighty, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start highlighting the light leather colors on the normal sisters. So I'm going to grab some more of that flow improver. We're going to put that into some skeleton bone from the army painter. And we're just going to very carefully come in and just base coat all of the leather parts. So the tabard here, as well as her sleeves. And then don't forget the back. Alright, so now that our cloak, or well, the light leather of the cloak has been painted, we're going to go ahead and grab some Seraphim Sepia, or another, you could probably use a flesh ink or wash, something like that. And we're just going to paint that whole cloak in that color. Now don't go super heavy on this, but you know, get it in all the recesses and stuff like that. Don't let it pool a ton, because we're going to go back over this with our base color and just re-pick out those highlights. This is just to kind of add a little bit of depth to what we've already done. Highlight those buttons and stuff like that. So again, this is just going to add a little bit of shadow to what we've already got on the model, and pick out some of those areas that need a little bit of extra definition. Don't forget the sleeves. There we go. That's not too bad. Make sure, again, that it doesn't pull too much. If you want a little bit to stay in some of the shadows, you can just kind of drag it along some of the ridges, and it'll kind of collect down where you might want it. But there we go. So we'll come back and we'll highlight that. Alright, so once you have painted your washes and they've dried, everything's kind of toned down a lot. What I like to do is I'm going to come back with that base color. I'm going to thin it down just a teeny bit more. And I'm just going to basically reestablish that base tone just wherever the wash hasn't settled. So here on this top piece is fine. I'm basically going to avoid this little area here. And it's not necessarily the best way to paint cloth, I guess, or this isn't cloth, but fabric or clothing. But I think that it does a really good job of like giving you that shadow that you want kind of quickly and easily without having to think too much about it. Anyway, we're going to work that across the model. There's a line here that I want to keep the way that it is. Something like that. There we go. And then on the front, same type of deal. There we go. So something like that. Again, you don't have to be too precise, but we want those kind of subtle shadows in the cloth and stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and work around the rest of the model, and we'll come back. Alright, so now that our main dudes are pretty much done as far as the majority of their clothing, I'll give you a quick look at what those guys look like. You know, nothing too crazy. We're going to go ahead and jump over to our Sister Superior for a little bit. I took just a tiny little like tip of a brush worth of Xerxes purple. We mixed that in with some red. just to darken it down a tiny little bit. And we're going to go ahead and base coat her entire cloak, the front and the back robes, the thing that's going over top of her power pack. All of that is getting this color. So take your time. Red is kind of translucent, so you know it's definitely going to take you at least 2 coats. Don't rush this. Try not to hit areas you've already hit. And we'll come back when this is base coated up. Alrighty, so once you have achieved the opacity you want on your red, I'm going to come in with Carroburg Crimson. It's a really dark, a little bit purpley kind of red, and we're just going to shade this cloak down just to kind of create that separation we need between some of the border and you know, in the folds and stuff like that. Create that shadow. Don't let it pull too much. Same rules as the other cloaks. And just work your way around, and we'll come back when this is done. Alright, so now that your cloak is all done and it's washed, we're going to do just like we did with the other cloaks. We're going to come back with our base color, except this time we're not going to mix any purple in. We're just going to go straight red, and we're going to do the same thing we did last time. We're just going to hit those highlights, stay away from wherever it pulled in the recesses, and just kind of let that be your shadow color. That should give us a nice vibrant red. Now if you need to do a couple coats, again, you know, I try not to like do too much in the way of highlighting cloth. I don't remember who I saw say it, but it was something that made sense to me. Like, typically cloth is just whatever the color it is, so I try to come as close to what I want it to be as possible and not highlight up, but I try to make sure that I wash down and I get those shadows, and then you know, just maintain that base color. I just think it looks really nice that way. And I will also be the first to admit that cloth is kind of one of my weaknesses. I haven't quite nailed it yet, but I'm getting better. I'm getting to a point where I'm more confident. So we're going to go ahead and finish basing that out, and we'll be back. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to paint the leather bits. So we're going to start with her because there's not that many. But anything that you want to be that leather color, we're going to go ahead and paint just a dark brown. Not too dark, but dark enough. So I'm using, funnily enough, oak brown. And we're just going to paint her gloves in. Alrighty, and once that dries, we'll come back and do the next step. Okay, so we're going to come back to the Novitiates for this, just because there's more leather to show off on these. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to that bone color, the same color we used to base coat all these robes, and we're just going to kind of very gently touch and drag and draw little lines and stuff like that to create the impression of weather on these leather parts. Now this is obviously optional. If you don't like this, just drop a Nuln Oil or a Agrax wash over these parts to just kind of give them that shadow they need. But I've found that this works. And it works the best if you do it in like 2 or 3 little layers. So like maybe do like a light edge highlight, like a broken edge highlight here on the edge of this hilt. And then like, you'll see what we do in a minute, but basically you just want to kind of be random with it. Don't like glob on the paint too much, but light dots, light scratches. If it's bigger than you want, it's not a huge deal. It's going to get covered. Ideally, this technique works best in multiple layers. So we're just going to work our way around. We're going to grab those areas that we want to have that weather. So like on the gloves, I'll work around the knuckles, any wrinkles and stuff you see on the wrist, and then a little bit towards like the top, and then just kind of grab some hard edges and stuff like that if there are any. But you don't have to be too methodical about this or do this a certain way. Just make sure you pick out some of the detail here. And again, if you can work fine, that it works best that way, but if you make a little mistake, don't sweat it too much. So we'll call that first pass there done. So I'm going to let this dry a minute and then we'll come back. Okay, so once that's dry, you're going to take Seraphim Sepia or another sepia colored ink. I think a flesh wash would do well here too. Grab a brush that's big but not too big, something you're comfortable or you would be comfortable base coating with, because we want to watch out for these other details. And we're just going to run a layer of this over top of everything we just did. And this is what I was talking about with the layers. So again, this technique is going to work best if you work back and forth between the wash and the weathering step, because this kind of brings things back down to that like almost leather color. I think it blends really well with them. And the more layers of this you do, the more you're going to cover that first and second, couple passes, and it's going to give that warm tone back. And it basically, no matter how many times you end up doing this, you want to make sure that you end with the wash excuse me, and not with the weathering step, unless you want something to look really messed up. But yeah, so just slowly work your way around like this, and then we're gonna hit this a couple times. I might do 2, maybe 3 passes. Again, the more you do this, the better it's gonna look, and you'll get some interesting looking leather patterns. Again, less is more here. Work real light, put this wash over top, take a look at it, see what you like, what you don't like, and if you're not a fan, just rebase coat it in brown and move on. So we're going to finish this up on all these guys, and then we'll come back. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back, we're going to paint the pants. Now, I'm going just kind of off of the pictures included in the book and on the website and stuff like that. I wasn't really sure what to do with these, and I think they're on the promotional stuff. They're like a tealy kind of green, and I think it matches with the armor, or at least that's the idea, but it's not power armor. So I believe that all of the leggings for the regular Novitiates was done in Incubi Darkness. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply Incubi Darkness over the entire leg, and then we're just going to wash it down. There's like a bit of a gradient running towards the bottom, so we'll probably just hit it with like a blue or a green wash and call it a day, because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with this anyway. I really definitely didn't want to paint leather again, so we're going to go ahead and base coat this, and then we'll come back. Alright, so this next step's pretty straightforward. We're just going to go ahead and take, I'm using Nuln oil, but if you've got like a blue wash or maybe even a green wash, just go ahead and put that down on the pants. Try and pull that down to the bottom if you can. And let it dry. Alright, so we're getting close to the finish line here. We're going to start by painting some skin on the faces of the characters. So we're going to use this one to demonstrate for starters. So for her, I'm using we're going to start with a dark brown. And I'm literally just going to base coat her entire face. Just avoid details you've already painted. Watch out for all that white. Watch out for all the detail around her neck and stuff. And if she focuses, there we go. You should end up with something kind of like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a second coat on this, and we'll come right back. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is get our camera in focus. That'll definitely help our cause here a little bit. Let me switch over to manual. So we're going to mix in a little bit of a warmer brown, and we're going to pick out a couple of highlights. So we don't have to go too crazy here, but like grab the top of her nose, cheeks, top lip, and then like the top of her chin. So we can do this on all the models that share this tone. These ones are a little easier because they have the gas mask on. And then one more. Nothing too crazy. So we're going to let that dry a little bit, and we'll come back. We're going to layer up a little more. Alright, and for the final highlight, we're going to grab that fine brush. We're going to mix in just a little bit of like a normal Caucasian flesh tone, you know, anything that you normally see labeled as flesh. And we're just going to grab the highest highlights, so the tip of the nose, just the corner of the cheekbones, just that little bit on the top lip there, that teeny bit on the chin. And then we're going to go ahead and wash this back down. So I'm going to use like an Agrax Earth shade, I think. I might try my chances with a normal flesh wash and see if that kind of blends everything together, but you know, you want something that's going to be a little darker, but something that's going to match the tone. Excuse me, the tones around it. So, if you wanted to, you could leave it that way, but that's up to you. All right, so we're going to grab, like I said, that Richland flesh shade. I'm actually going to wick a lot of this off on the side of the wash container, and I'm just going to drag this around the face, make sure we don't pull it anywhere. Clean that brush off. Fortunately, these don't have a ton of surface area, so it's really easy to just kind of come in real quick, pick out what you want, and then clean up with the brush. So, next we're going to paint the whites of the eyes. Good Lord. Okay, so once we've got the skin painted and the flesh wash applied, we're going to take a small bit of off-white. We're going to put it on one of your better brushes. You're going to wick most of it off. Get that nice point, and you're going to come in from the side. And you're just going to touch real gently into the eye. and you flip it upside down. And once more. So, there we go. Now to repeat it on the other 9. Alright, now that that's done, we're going to move a couple of these guys over here. We're going to come in, we're going to grab a pure white, and in what probably could have been done earlier or maybe even later, we're going to do the same kind of technique we did to get the eyes painted, but we're going to go ahead and very carefully trace the wings on these shoulder pads. Work slowly, try and work on the inside. Really light brush pressure. And if you don't get the whole thing, that's fine too. Just make sure that you at least leave enough of an impression that like there is some shade down there where we hit that with that real thin down Nuln Oil earlier. So I'm going to go paint the rest of these, and then we'll come back and talk about the remaining couple little bits. Alright, so we're going to bust out the dry palette. We're going to switch over to some metallics. And we're going to base coat everything that's going to be a silver metallic in this case. So I'm going to start with the head dressing. There's the little, I can't remember what this emblem is called. But they all have that. That symbol is also on the shoulder pads. So for all the regular sisters, for all, even the specialists, basically everybody except the leader is going to get this in silver. Just pop that on there like that. And then we're going to grab the gun barrels. Excuse me. So now that that is all taken care of, we're going to go ahead and carry that across the rest of the models. And, oh, don't forget the sword. Big old sword. We will come back and finish all these guys off. Alright, so next we're going to go ahead and we're going to base coat the body of the gun in black. You know, you don't have to be super neat until you get around areas that have already been painted. So like, you know, watch these fingers here. I find it's best to kind of like paint kind of close to details like that and then push your brush kind of into them and then just very gently sweep across. Now if there's anything you missed, it's not a big deal because silver and gold and stuff like that is going to go really nicely over black. It's going to make it a little bit more reflective. It's going to make it look a little nicer. So if anything, if you missed anything, it's just going to look better because you waited till after this to do it. But I plan on doing at least 2 layers of metallics, but we'll see what happens. So go ahead and get that base coated and we'll be back. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start base coating some of this gold detail. So I'm going to come in here with a kind of dark, almost like a coppery gold. I'm just going to work my way up. I'm not going to jump straight into the gold that I want. So this is like a, it's kind of like a metallic brown really. It's Gihana's gold from GW. Oh, wait a minute. It's Balthazar gold. What in the world? Anyway, just go ahead and base out all the sections that you want to be gold. If you don't want to go straight from this, you can jump straight into the gold you want to use. Just apply a couple layers because I know that acrylic gold especially has a tendency to be kind of really bad at covering. So I'm starting from here and I'm going to use kind of the GW method to build my colors up a little bit. Excuse me. And part of that, I'm going to switch my brush over, is going to be plotting out the trim. So around the eye here, I need to paint the trim of this and then the trim of the actual cloak, which is going to be a little bit easier but still kind of difficult. So just take your time, work your way across, get it where you want it, and then we'll come back and bring it up a little bit. Alright, so once that's all done, you're going to come in with your Liberator Gold. I've gone ahead and I've painted the trim around the cloak and the chest and the backpack because I knew that I was not going to be able to do that like hunched all the way up here to the back of my desk. But, you know, obviously you're going to follow the same kind of method. You're just going to reach in there, you're going to grab the details you want in this gold, and that darker, you know, brown gold behind it is going to help that shine just a little bit more. But take your time, work your way around the details. Try not to touch any of the finished stuff. If you touch metallics and stuff, it's not a huge deal, but obviously the less stuff you hit that you're not, or that you don't want to, the less stuff you're gonna have to fix later. So grab the hilt to the sword. We're gonna go ahead and grab the wreath thing around her back. And just, you know, get what you need. Alright, so next we're going to go ahead and we're going to wash all of the metallics. There it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a coat of Richland Flesh Shade over everything. Normally this is kind of reserved for the golds. It kind of adds a little warmth, kind of brings everything in line. And now that I've put it over a piece of gold and not a piece of silver, I think I am going to go with my gut and not put that on my silver. So we're going to just wash the gold out with Richland Flesh Shade. It doesn't have to be incredibly neat. It doesn't have to look perfect. Just cover the gold. Now if you don't want to cover the trim, that is understandable. I think I'm going to get in here just a teeny bit. Pick up a little bit of that. Just like that. Nothing too crazy. I'm not going to worry about the front, but I am going to pick out the skull here and then the little Inquisitor thing. At least I'm pretty sure that's what that is. Alright, so that's where we're going to leave that gold. So while that's drying, we're going to go ahead and grab our Nuln Oil. I don't know why I put her that far off to the side, because we're going to wash her too. So Nuln Oil for the silvers. Now you can use Agrax, you can use the Flesh Shade, whatever you like. I like the way this looks against silver. And we're going to bring both of these colors back up just a teeny bit. Not so much the gold, I'm more referring to the silvers. That's really all you need for her. Cool. So once these all dry and I get the rest of them done, we'll come back and do some more. Alrighty. So once your washes... Oh, forgot my lights. Once your wash is dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the center portion of this blade mostly dark. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of... Maybe that's a little too much paint, but we're going to kind of just trace the blade. And you can do this as like an edge highlighter. You can work onto the blade a little bit. Mix it up a little, because it kind of creates some use on the blade. That's just the way I'm going to highlight it. Alright, so I'm going to grab the top of this little power node here. And don't worry, we're not going to leave that alone. We're going to come back and mess with that a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a good... Actually, I'm going to clean this brush off. We're going to use a smaller brush. Let's grab a little bit of a finer brush. And let's just throw like a little damage on like some of the chip or the edges and stuff of the gold. Just pick a few spots here and there, sharp corners, things like that. Edge highlights near the absolute top of these gold sections. You don't have to do every single one of them, but just grab a couple here and there. Alright, so we're going to work this through the rest of the army, and we'll be back. Alright, so for the last few details, we've only got 2 major colors left to paint. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab a bone color or a tan, and we're going to paint all the parchment. Make sure you get the front and the back. And then once that's all done, we're going to grab all those seals. So I'm going to take a little diversion from that base coat. We're going to come in with a Screamer Pink. It's the color I like to use. I think it's got like a nice kind of magenta, between magenta and red, and just kind of base coat those in. That's actually really thin. Okay, that's a little better. So once you get those all base coated, let them dry. We're going to come back and wash them out. And I lied, there's one more color we're going to paint. I was working my way around some of the models and noticed a small detail that I'd missed. Some of the models have grenades. So, to paint those, we're just going to come in with some green. Any green you want. You don't even have to paint them green if you don't want to. You paint them whatever color you want, but I'm going with green. I'm using Death World Forest, and it's pretty much a matter of doing that, and then when we come to the wash stage of the next step, we'll just hit them with a green or a brown wash, and that will make those look the way I want them to. So, okay, so now that this is all dried, we're going to take Agrax Earthshade, and I'm going to run this across all of this. Now this is a little darker than I want it to be, so we're just going to try and pull, we're going to use this as like a palette almost, and we're going to try and put this across as many elements on this model as we can, including the purity seals. Just try and soak up as much of that as you can. Again, make sure you get the backs of everything. But you don't want this to lay super heavy, especially on the fronts. So if you're still getting pooling that you don't want, just kind of try and soak that up and put it somewhere else. So here you go, we'll stick that on the back now. And that one little brush load will go a long way. There we go. And then if there's still more than you want, just wick it off on a paper towel and you should be okay. Just don't let it pull real heavy on flat areas. If there's a little bit in the corners, like that kind of looks okay. But you know, I really don't want it on flat sections. So what you can do here is you're gonna reapply that base coat. So we'll come back and do that in a minute. But you know, we want to almost reestablish, but not as a normal base coat. You want to come in kind of rough. I'll show you in a minute. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish doing these purity seals, and we'll be back. Alright, so everything that's left has been washed with that Agrax Earthshade, even the grenades. Just wanted to clarify that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a small brush. We're going to grab that base, bone color. That's what I wanted to say. And we're just going to come in and we're going to kind of real roughly just kind of come in here and apply a little bit to the middle sections of the parchment and just bring some of the brightness back up. Stay away from where parchment overlaps or where it overlaps itself, and then stay away from the edges if you can help it. Now I've got this thinned down a little bit so I can work transparent, and I can kind of slowly build to that opacity that I want. I don't think it's going to take me more than like maybe 2 coats maximum, but don't worry about covering the entire thing. This is the section where I'm not going to worry about the back, because I don't feel like the back's going to matter as much as the front, because I do plan on putting some text on these, and there's lots of great videos out there for that. I'm not very good at it, so I'm not going to put it in the tutorial. I also feel like this video is long enough as it is, so we're going to skip that one this time. And this will be the last actual thing I show you, besides the models being finished. So go ahead and get that parchment where you want it. From here we're going to paint the bases the exact same way we did the towel. So some earth color, some wash, some dry brushing, paint the bricks, and then call it a day. So stay tuned for the gallery. Thank you guys for watching. If you found this video helpful, the best way you can help this channel grow and help more content like this come out is to share it with your friends, like it, subscribe, and then there's additional links in the bio or in the description of the video if you want to do a little more. Completely optional, but thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys after the gallery.